So, Joe, thanks so much for joining me. I always find an interesting way to get to know someone straight off the bat is, looking at their top three, whether it's music, books, or whatever. But since you're in a more of a filmmaking world and capacity, I'm going to hit you straight off the bat here with top three movies. And I know it's going to be difficult because trying to narrow that down, people get so slumped. But give us your best shot.
Oh man, that's always a difficult one. So I'll use my. It's saying you're picking your favorite movies, kind of like picking your favorite kid. Um, it's like I love all these different things about them. I'd say my absolute favorite film is the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and I count it as one movie because I can't not sit down and watch all 12 hours of the extended editions over the course of a day or two. Um, Number two would probably be Oh Brother, Where Art Thou from the Coen
Ah,
brothers.
yeah.
One of my all-time favorite movies that came out when I was just a little kid, but my family is very Appalachian.
Oh, yeah.
We're all from the hills of Kentucky, and so like a lot of bluegrass and stuff in that movie. That so my family introduced that to me when I was really young, and I loved it. So that was really influential. And then this one's not so much like I think it's a cinematic masterpiece, but it is one of the movies that made me want to make movies. Is Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah.
I love that movie so much because it was an indie movie that was made on a super low budget, and it's so funny to me. It's so uncomfortable and awkward, and I took a lot of inspiration and like framing and awkward humor from that, and
Yeah.
it's one of those like nostalgic childhood movies for me that I just that came out in what '04, and so I was 11 years old when that movie came out,
Yeah.
so it was like that was my adolescence is watching Napoleon Dynamite with my friends and quoting it.
Yeah, there's some good killer movies in there. Because I always find it so interesting. It's almost like a rock back test, when you ask someone a movie, because, what makes someone connect with a movie is obviously they're connecting with a part probably in themselves that they're finding or it's drawn out in the movie. So it's really interesting there. There's a bit of it goes across a broad spectrum. We have,
It
the kind
does.
of Lord of the Rings into the deep world building fantasy, drifting kind of more into that kind of comedic element. And I
Mhm.
suppose when you look at, there's definitely this sense of comedy in some of the movies that are the shorts and all you've brought out.
Mhm.
And but where are you finding then the inspiration? Because there is Squalor, you have 0%, which is a bit more of a horror. Squalor's kind of a bit more suspenseful, but then
Mhm.
Stoner's comedy.
Yeah.
There's kind of there's a yeah, I suppose an eclectic taste there. Where does that come from?
So I part of it is like trying to understand my own mind. I think I really enjoy genres, and I always think it's fun when filmmakers dabble in other genres. And another filmmaker friend of mine, Johnny Catalano is his name, and he one time told me, he said, "I think your best work comes when you start to make a J.W. Cox film in a genre you haven't played in." So he's like, you kind of mash things up. And I was like, huh, I never really thought about it that way. He's like, yeah. He's like, haven't you noticed that's what you're doing? And I was like, not even a little. I just kind of was like, oh, I want to make a comedy. Or I want to make a drama. I want to make I want to make so when it came down to the like Stone is my stoner comedy, and I'm not a stoner. I've never smoked weed in my life. I don't particularly like the smell of it. I've never wanted to. I have a lot of friends who are. I just never, wanted to. But I was like, I thought stoner comedies were so, kind of like slapstick, and I was like, what if I took some of my signature dark humor and, I made a dark comedy stoner movie? And I was like, and all stoner movies are just, kind of, spacey, ditzy dudes.
Yeah.
And I decided, I was like, what if they were chicks and they were like violent narcissistic sociopaths,
Yeah.
but
My
also
favorite type
stoners.
of character.
Yeah, so I was like, I just decided to turn that genre on its head a little bit, and then because I don't know a single violent stoner, I was like, I decided I was like, there had to be a little plot twist in there where they weren't really smoking real weed, so I like to play with genres. So like where Squalor came out was I liked the idea. I always like a little bit of magic with realism.
Mm.
So I thought about, oh, well, what if, you know, so first off, my mom believes in Bigfoot. My mom loves Bigfoot. She loves cryptids and like she like watches
Yeah.
Bigfoot shows and like tells me all about it and we bond over it. Because I'm a skeptic, but I love it. But I also love the idea of there being a creature in
Yeah.
the woods.
It's fun.
It's fun. It's fun. Whether or not I love researching cryptids and stuff. So I was like, what if you were a kid of a Bigfoot researcher and everybody thought it was the stupidest thing and they all made fun of your dad all the time or your mom. And
Oh,
so I was like, what if that person went missing? Would anybody take it seriously? And that's what sparked it. And then I started like, I was like, well, who would be there to help? I'm like, well, it needs to be someone with a position of authority who can help, you know, but they need to be overcoming something too. So like
yeah.
that's where it spawned from. And I really started focusing on, this cop storyline of her seeing a little bit of herself and her lack of confidence in this girl. And, originally it started as like a father-son story and then it became a father-daughter story because I've got three daughters. So as
Yeah.
I've gotten older, when I first had this little sprinkling, of an idea, my, 5-year-old was like a few days old. And so
Yeah.
like I just had it in my idea book and then I just decided to come back around to it and say, hey, what if I finally made that kind of Bigfoot movie? But it's not really about Bigfoot, it's just about people and there happens to
Yeah.
be a Bigfoot,
Yeah.
you know?
That's it. It's almost the overarching presence is there, but it's not there. You know, that kind of way, and the story kind of
Right.
weaves around it, which is brilliant.
Yeah, and that was kind of the fun was I wanted people to really question if they were gonna see a Bigfoot. And even if they do see it, what did they really see?
Yeah.
Because that's how it kind of feels when you have, a supernatural encounter or a cryptid encounter is like you question what you saw. You start trying to make sense of it. And so I wanted the audience to kind of feel that way too. Like, well, did they really see the squalor?
Yeah.
What did they see? And I think, you probably walked away. I walk away that I think they experienced the squalor, but I leave it open for you, to kind of decide if was it their mind, was it a guy in a suit? I don't know.
Yeah. And
I mean,
that's the reality
filming it,
of
it
it.
was a guy in a suit, but
Yeah.
filming it was
Like,
just my brother. My brother's 6'7", and I kid you not, we put him in a ghillie suit in the middle of the woods on a hot summer day,
oh,
and he braved it out, and he wore platform boots too to make him a little even taller in the woods amongst the trees. And so we had my 6'7" brother out in the middle of the woods in a ghillie suit and like a racking focus to try to make it look blurry and
ah,
like
that is class. That is brilliant. But no, I think like uh, some of the worst injustice on like a good film is showing like the monster too early. Like you want that like thing to build. Like I think was it American Werewolf in London? It was one of them films anyway that didn't show like the werewolf for so long, so people had just built up the idea of what it
yeah.
was going to look like, and it builds the suspense. It's nearly showing your hand too quick if you see the monster. But
Hmm.
likewise on that, the fact that it's only a vignette you really get is
Yeah.
is brilliant. Like because it's it's nearly immersive for the audience as well because they're building what it's more parts of
Hmm.
the monster, the squalor.
Absolutely. I mean, when I think about like tension with monsters and monster movies, I always think of Spielberg with Jaws. He was upset at the time because the story goes that he basically this shark was such like this mechanical shark they had built was such a nightmare to work with, and it looked so bad on camera. And his editor was like, "Well, if we just keep it for like never show the shark longer than 2 seconds, and the eyes can't read that it's fake." And he's like, "But we spent so much time and money on this shark," and then he's like, she's like, "But it looks fake. That's the problem."
Yeah, it looks
So
like a robot.
yeah, it looks like a robot. So they, using, sparingly, like the presence of the shark is scarier, and the reactions to the shark are scarier than the shark itself. And then I think of, Alfred Hitchcock with tension building, like, you two people sit at a table and a bomb goes off, it's random. But if the clock is ticking and they don't know, that tension starts building, right? If the audience knows that the bomb is under the table, and the
Yeah,
two people are sitting there and they don't know, we start feeling tight chested. We know what's about to happen,
Yeah.
right? So, and that's what, even with the squalor, like the build up to that, and it's, I would even call the squalor horror. It's like loosely, it's like fantasy, family
Yeah.
movie, a little bit of both. And there's some horror elements in that, the tension of that, scene when she's in the woods, because we know they talk by knocking. So we start hearing knocking and we start building to it because we know as an audience what that could mean. And this
Mm.
character is a bit of a skeptic, you
Yeah.
know? So, yeah, I just like to think about all these things I've learned from listening and watching other directors, and like, how can I apply them to my very small scale story?
Yeah. But like I think you said something really great there a few minutes ago, like with the randomness. Like when you look in the publishing world, like Penguin started out as Penguin Random House. Like they wanted, like there was none of this. Like, because when you're like submitting now novels to like agents and all, they want everything like genre specific, and it's like. But like I think with a natural, with like an artist, like yourself when you're making the movies, like with a lot of writers, I think a lot of people get pigeonholed into one genre and they can't
Yeah,
escape it because you'll only maybe get producers or agents or publishers backing you because they know it's worked. There's an economic model. The first book
yeah,
worked, the first movie worked. But I think it's so brilliant to be able to explore all them other different parts. Like go back to what Penguin was, that random house, that ideas, stories come in all forms. It doesn't have to go down like the one track. So yeah, like I'd say that's so good that you don't have to keep going with the one genre, or we have to make another, it has to be a comedy, it has to be a stoner comedy. You can go into these other
right.
ones like 0%, where it's that kind of dark grittiness.
Yes, yes, that one, and that one's a lot of fun. I always joke that, Brandy Botkin, who's the star of 0%, she made me look like a much better director than I am. She is so talented. Even like she's so good at playing this like distraught, distressed woman,
Yeah.
and she's done this in other parts before. And our sound mixer on set was like, Brandy, I feel like I've seen you in this role before. Like, just like you're kind of getting typecast now as this distressed woman, and
Yeah.
she's like a cheat code. She just has so much emotion naturally. Like her face, as soon as you call action, just looks sad.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how are you? You're like one of the nicest and sweetest and happiest people I've ever met. The second we call action, you just naturally look sad.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
That's a
it's cheat
skill.
code.
It's a talent,
Oh,
like.
she's incredible. She's
Yeah.
absolutely incredible. One of my favorite people to work with. Um, yeah, she blows
And
me away. Go ahead. Oh,
like
sorry.
Joe, on that, so when I was watching that, like obviously you're shooting with like a 4K camera, but how, like, is there a filter put on? How do you get it where it looks like this? Like obviously it's really clear resolution, but it also has this like kind of grittiness on the. Is it a filter? Like, is that post production, or do you put an actual lens on a camera, like to give it that uh, kind of moodier look?
Oh, I mean, has a lot of credit to give to my cinematographer. On 0%, that was Matthew Kennedy. He's also the one who shot Stoned. Um, when we went into 0%, we scouted this house that was built in like the 1800s, and which I know to Ireland and the UK and all that, like that's not old, but to hear that's really old.
Yeah.
Our country's about 250 years old, so a house built in the 1800s. It had this dungeony basement, and we just we talked about it. We're like, what if all of our lighting was just motivated from one window? This window that's creaking down. This is her little hope for getting out of here is all coming from the light coming from that window, and she's soaking it in. I was like, no other sources. And so
Yeah.
we only used a huge light blowing through that window to create daylight, but even at all hours, it's coming through that light. And then we would just bounce things. That's how it's really just lighting. And then, a little bit of color grade that, to kind of emphasize that. I do think Matt used a pro mist filter on
Ah,
that to kind of create that kind of ethereal,
that's it.
so yeah, that kind of ethereal look to it, because we like the hints of the supernatural in 0%. I leave a few breadcrumbs for you to kind of decide whether or not you think there really is an apocalypse outside. Because whether or not he's lying is totally up to you, and
Yeah.
because he's not proven to be a trustworthy person, but also he's not lying about some other things. So,
Yeah,
you know,
that's the thing.
yeah, I wanted you to walk away not sure what you believed.
Yeah.
And I've had so many people have so many different theories about how that movie ends, and I never tell you what I think happened because I don't, I want you to have that experience of, you know, what you took away from it. And I'm not usually like that. I usually have a clear ending, but in that scenario, I was like, you know, it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So
Yeah.
I kind of left it, you know, ambiguous on purpose.
Yeah. Well, like I think with the just kind of that like apocalypse or post-apocalypse, like I think the way like trends are popping up, the unrest that's popping up, like it seems like it gets like I think that what is it, the doomsday clock we're another second
Yes.
closer or something like that. But
Oh
my,
yeah.
my only hope is that it all peters back down, but we get a whole lot of post-apocalyptic and dystopian fiction. It's like my favorite
Yes.
genre. So I'm just hoping there's going to be a big surge. Everything's going to be okay,
Oh yeah.
but we'll
Oh
get a
yeah.
ton of just really good post-apocalyptic dystopian, movies, books, all coming out.
Mhm. Movies are very much a statement of the time they were made in. So like,
Yeah,
you know, like post 9/11, we got a lot of, you know, patriotic, you know, military movies and,
yeah,
you know, and then during the recession, we got a lot of, you know, we got a lot of that post-apocalyptic stuff for a little while. And then, you know, now we're in a time where the world feels like it's in a crisis. We got a lot of superhero movies where, because people want a hero, you know, people are craving that. I mean, that's even how like comic books got started. Was like superheroes became really popular during World War II and post World War II, because people were like they just wanted hope. They wanted something to like be like, hey, I could grasp onto that little bit of hope. It felt good. It was a dopamine hit of, you know, joy, you know,
wow,
and that's why a lot of, you know, Hollywood filmmakers and cartoonists and stuff at the time, were making, you know, pro Allied propaganda and stuff for the troops. So entertainment's always been kind of a stamp of the time it's made, at least, you know, film and you know, television and production. Because I mean, realistically, it's the, you know, youngest form of media, you know, or outlet of stories. You know, writing's been around
yeah,
forever. Campfire stories have been around forever. You know,
yeah,
but you know, movies are only, I don't know what, 130 years old.
yeah.
It's a, you know, it went from a train coming at the screen to, you know, whatever, you know, Disney's cooking up with the new Star Wars movies.
Yeah, yeah, and like even the kind of even going modern filmmaking, but like with like the original Jurassic Park, like we talked about the Jaws shark a moment ago, but the original Jurassic Park, man, even when I go back and look at them movies, like the dinosaurs still stand up, and I think that was that 98. It
Yes.
was in the 90s. I could be wrong with 98.
93.
90,
93.
93. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
What were they using, I wonder? Like, to get them dinosaurs looking so real. Like, obviously, like I think they look better than the CGI ones, nearly. Like, kind of, there's something
Well,
about them more visceral.
there are CGI ones in those, but and even the CGI holds up really well in those. But the puppets, the lighting, the camera tricks, the angles, everything was incredible in that. I still reference that of any a horror movie ever. I still think, and I don't consider Jurassic Park like true horror, but there are horror elements. Um, but like the scene with the velociraptors in the kitchen, I still cite as the scariest thing in my childhood.
Yeah.
That scene, I still am tight chested every time I watch it. I'm like,
Yeah.
oh man, like I cringe every single time because the tension building in that scene and the layered work that Spielberg did to make you fear these aspects of this, and that these creatures are smarter than we thought. You know,
Yeah.
that this idea that they have this higher level thinking, that you're not expecting from an animal. So you know, I mean that scene, like, to this day still, like I reference it. I'm like, that is the best piece of tension. It's something all the Jurassic World movies lack. Like they use spectacle
Yeah.
and you know, and big kills to make it feel like horror, but I'm like, what it's lacking is tension.
The tension.
Tension's what you need.
Yeah.
Tension's what makes you feel tight chested. It's what makes you feel scared for safety. Something, a T-Rex coming down and cutting somebody in half with his teeth isn't scary. It's shock, but it's
Yeah,
not
it's
scary.
shock, it's gore.
It's when you keep thinking it might not happen and then it does happen. That's where the tension is. Is that the build up to the potential of it happening is where tension is.
And Joe, on that, because this is a really interesting point. Like, so on that, so like obviously, is it? Why don't they get that now? Because I know there's a new. No, I'll still always go to a Jurassic World Park movie. I will always spend my money on it because I think it's the childhood nostalgia and everything.
Oh
But
yeah,
I love the idea of it. But like, I think because the movie industry gets a lot of criticism lately. That's there's too much of the CGI. But why do you think that tension bit is missing in some of the movies, or like the subtleties in screenwriting that was so? I think like the 90s was probably the best era, but again, I'm a millennial. You kind of always you'll always
yeah,
prefer that when you were that
oh
teenage
yeah.
years and stuff. But yeah, what do you think's missing these days, like in some of the big
Uh,
blockbuster movies?
I'm a millennial too, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm 31. I'm at the tail end of the millennials, and I'm very nostalgic for the 90s as well because my older siblings were teenagers in the 90s, so I grew up with a lot of 90s stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I think the biggest difference is the studio system becoming a whole lot more paint by the numbers. Um, Used to, because there's so much money at stake, right? With these big studios, when they're putting, hundreds of millions of dollars into a project, they want it to be as safe as possible, as safe an investment as possible. And I think what they're missing is the kind of auteur, director with a real specific vision, because aside from like the Spielbergs of the world and the Christopher Nolans of the world, you're not getting a big budget for a director that has a very specific style. I mean,
Oh.
look at someone like Wes Anderson, who he does not make big budget movies. His, like they're big compared to what I do as an indie filmmaker, but
Yeah.
he's not getting Christopher Nolan money. He's not getting Spielberg money. Um, but it has a very specific niche vision. And I think you're seeing a lot less of that. You're getting a lot of directors who are safe directors. They know how to block. They know how to, tell a connected story, but they don't have a unique vision for it. I mean, look at the Marvel movies, the prime example. I have a lot of fun with Marvel movies. I really like them.
Yeah.
But, and he caught a lot of flack for saying it, but Martin Scorsese compared it to theme park rides. There's not, once you've ridden it, you have the thrill, but there's not a lot there to take away from at the end.
Yeah.
And,
That's a
and that's
lovely
kind of how
analogy.
I feel. There are a few Marvel movies that I think there's something that was said and good commentary and like, but when I watch them, and I think Spider-Man No Way Home is probably the prime example of this. Rewatch that movie at home and watch Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man enter the frame without a crowd and he sits there and pauses. It's like he's waiting for the applause before the dialogue goes on. It's a spectacle. It's not artistic filmmaking anymore. It's like we're creating an event, and that can be fun. And there's a place for that in media, but you're missing a lot of that personal touch. A lot of those 90s movies that we're nostalgic for and early 2000s movies, they were still using directors who had unique visions and unique storytelling techniques because people were still going to the movies regularly. But now with more and more on, at home and on demand, you have less people getting their butts in seats in theaters because they have huge screens at home and surround sound
Yeah.
systems at home, and they can watch whatever they want and not have to
When
pay
they want.
$15-20 a ticket. And then
Yeah.
to get popcorn is, popcorn and a drink the last time I was at AMC was like $13-14. And that's
Yeah.
in the Midwest in Ohio where, we're not even talking about California prices or New York
Yeah.
prices, So you have to really earn the audience and that you have to give them experience they can't have anywhere else. And I'll say I think where there's this resurgence of indie filmmaking, like what I do, because people are looking for that authenticity that they're missing
Oh
in those
yeah.
big budget movies. And I'm not saying that my stuff's Hollywood level. It's not. I'm working on minuscule budgets, but I'm trying to tell stories that you can only see if I told it. You
Yeah.
know, and
And
I
that's
do
the
think I
magic, but
achieved
that's
that
the
with
allure, I
yeah,
think. That's the allure. Like, because Like it's when's the last? Me and my wife went to the cinema last to see. It was the Mission Impossible. And it is this spectacle. That's your typical kind of movie. I'll go to the movie for this, but like an old country for no man. You put that on, like something like that comes out like that. We talked about tension there a minute ago. I think one of the greatest scenes ever is Anton Chirrut
Yes.
with the time cost man. Like
Yeah.
that's the Velociraptor moment, but it's just kind of in a different context because you see
Yeah.
that cattle prod, or the kind of I think it's like a cattle prod. It's the thing that kills the cattle anyway, but that is just hair raising, and like I read on his character that they were trying to make it like it was just so unemotional and stuff that it was like nature. It was like like who lives or who dies. It was all modeled on like the kind of almost
Yeah.
villainous nature of nature, and it's just it's such a good movie. But yeah, throw something like that on the cinema, and people will go to see it. And I don't know, like, what do you think? Would that have been a big budget or?
It was pretty medium sized to smaller
Yeah,
budget. It was a Coen Brothers movie. They don't usually get like those big like
yeah,
blockbuster type budgets, but they're one of those kind of auteur filmmakers that they have a unique vision, and
yeah.
they don't really care whether or not you love their vision. They're going to tell their unique story that you can only see from them. That's where you get, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, Raising Arizona, and No Country for Old Men, and they have an incredible track record. I mean, one of my favorite films of all time is their film Inside Llewyn Davis. No one saw it. It
Never
flopped at
heard
the
of it.
box office. It flopped at the box. It's got Oscar Isaac before Star Wars fame and all that kind of stuff in it,
Sorry, say
and
the
Carey
name again,
Mulligan.
Joe.
It's called Inside Llewyn Davis.
Inside Lou
Um,
and Davis.
Llewyn
Yeah.
Davis, yeah, it's like a Welsh name. Um, it's got Oscar Isaac, Carey Mulligan, Marcus
Oh,
Mumford from Mumford and Sons does some of the music. It's got Justin Timberlake in it, of all people. Like it's an incredible movie about the folk music scene in the 1960s in New York,
wow.
and it's a story about failure. It's so good, and
Oh,
people didn't see it because they're like, "What is this? This isn't a superhero movie." And it was like a low
ah,
budget, you know, Coen Brothers movie that flopped at the box office. But if you go watch it, it's a masterpiece of storytelling. It's this guy goes on this odyssey of, pursuing the thing he loves, and he refuses to compromise. But his own choices are what leads him right back to where he started. It's like that's really what it's about. It's about failure, even for people who are talented. You might be talented and you might have all the passion, but maybe you're just not quite good enough. Maybe
yeah.
you're not marketable. Maybe it's because of things outside of your control. And that's what it's such a good commentary on art. And I'm like, it's one of my favorite movies ever. And no one talks about it. I've had so many people, I'm like, you've got to watch this movie. As an artist, you've got to watch this movie. And then they'll come back and they're like, I'm brokenhearted while watching it because you're
Ah,
like the guy's a jerk and he's his own problem but at the same time he's really good.
yeah.
Like, but he's
That
not
is
good enough.
interesting.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have to check that out. Yeah,
yeah.
God. When
If
did
you
it come
do,
out?
let me know. It came out in 2013 or 14, I think.
Okay.
It was while I was in college. I remember that because my wife before we were married had one year for Christmas got me a subscription to the Cinematographer, the magazine, and I there was a whole write up about the cinematography of that movie before it came out, and I was really excited about it. And I ended up going to see it, and it became one of like the core movies that really affected me at the beginning of my career. And yeah, so I love that film. I recommend it to everybody. I actually recommend it to my brother, who's not a filmmaker, and now he's told me he's like, that is one of my favorite movies in the last 10 to 15 years. Um, so yeah, it's a banger. If you haven't seen Inside Llewyn Davis, go watch it. Um,
Definitely.
which
Well,
I don't,
that's going to be
yeah,
on the
any of your
list.
listeners.
Yeah, that's going to be on the list. And I think that's a nice segue there. That could bring us back to 2013 there. It was kind of probably a big motivation behind going into like filmmaking and stuff like that. So yeah, let's go in. Like, how did Joe, like, from going to high school, like, did you always want to know you wanted to go into film? Like, was it a big passion? Like, cause you do the writing on the scripts, I think, as well. I seen on a lot of them. So, where did all this passion, I suppose, come from?
So, man, yeah, I've always been into the arts. I grew up, my mom was a music teacher and was into theater and all kinds of stuff. So I did some like stage acting in high school, and I played. I like being very performative. I played in a rock band in high school and in early college, um, and I always kind of like to work in the creative field. I never thought it was viable because I live in Ohio, and my grandfather always told me there's no jobs in film, and I even said to him at one point, I said, "Well, Pop," I said, "have you ever watched a movie?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And I said, "You know that black screen that pops up and there's all those words at the end?" And he's like, "Yeah." I said, "Those are all jobs,
Yeah.
all of them. Every single one of those names is a job." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, okay, fair enough." And
Yeah.
so basically, I was homeschooled in high school, and I spent a lot of my days. I would get my schoolwork done so fast while my friends were still at school, and so I would start writing sketches and little films and stuff, and then they would get off school, and we'd go out and film them. And then the next day, the next couple of days, I'd be editing them after my schoolwork was done, and then we'd all get together and watch them, and then post them to YouTube for the tens of people that would watch it. Uh, the few people, and they're all still on YouTube somewhere. If you are lucky enough to find them, please don't share them with anybody that respects me because they're so bad. But they're a lot of fun. My mom still thinks that the Bigfoot one we made in high school was the best thing I ever made, and it's atrocious. So yeah, I made a Bigfoot film in high school parodying the show Finding Bigfoot, that was on Animal Planet at the time, and
That sounds brilliant.
it was
I
a lot
like
of
the
fun.
sound of that.
It's terrible. Like my sister plays like the skeptic who's just like, this is where the Bigfoots frolic. Like they're here in the woods. Like, and there's no Bigfoots anywhere. Like our friend just walks by and they're like, that might have been one. Like it's really stupid. But we would just, we'd make all these sketches that we'd write out and we'd do some improv. And I fell in love with it. And I had a friend who, when I was really, really struggling through anxiety and depression, and I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next. I quit my band, and I was like, "What do I want to do? I want to go to film school, but like, there's no work in that, you know, for me. I mean, it's for talented people, not me."
Yeah.
That was what I believed, and she kind of kicked my butt. She said, "Joe, I like watching your stuff. Am I nobody?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah," but she's like, "You'll find an audience for it." But she was like, "You need to go to film school." She's like, "You have all of your life to go work in something like IT," which is what I was going to do. I was going to go into
Mm.
IT, and I really hated it. I actually really hate tech. I hate coding, I hate computers. I hate dealing with coding. I hate all that stuff. If I did, if it weren't for like my world needing to be networked, I would not be on social media even.
Yeah.
I'm so like, I would like to live on like a few acres of land in the middle of
Oh, it's the
nowhere and have
dream.
no access to the internet. It would be so nice. But I just know that's not realistic for the field that I love. Um, so I consider it a necessary evil. Um, but she was like, "You have all your life to go work in IT." She said, "Why don't you go to film school? Try to learn how to do this. Try to make it." And she's like, "If you don't make it by 30, you can go get your IT stuff.
Yeah.
If you don't make money, she was like, because what's going to happen, Joe?" She's like, "Is you're going to go take the safe route. You're going to go work in IT, and about 40 years old, everybody's going to be so tired of listening to you whining about what could have been and what should have been and what you might have done." She was like, "Instead of you just going to do it."
That's
She was
some
like,
hero advice.
yeah, she said, "I'm so sick of listening to you about it now, and it's only been a few days." And she was like, she was like, "So, and with your anxiety and your depression," she was very blunt. She was like, "You'll blow your brains out at 40 at your desk or at home, but no one's going to be like miss you anymore because they're tired of hearing you." And I was like, "Dang,
Dang.
that's cruel. That is really mean." But she said, "I'm right." And I was like, "Yeah." She's like, "So if you don't make it by 30, go work your IT job and you can die at 50 instead of 40." And I said, "Okay." So I talked to my parents and I convinced them that film might be viable, and they were okay with me living there while I went to film school. And the rest is kind of history. I ended up graduating and learning how to shoot weddings and commercials. And while I was struggling to get on sets, I just started my own business, and I started funding my own projects with that business. And my
Uh,
wife was very patient with me very early on while I didn't make any money. Um, you know, I was just telling a kid the other day that was asking me about how to make it in the field. I said, you got to be ready to basically make no money for your first 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
You make next to nothing, and then you slowly build your market, and then like I said, in the last 10 years, I've shot 200 weddings. I've shot a bunch of commercials, music videos, and stuff for locals, all while making independent movies to try to work toward making a feature film, someday.
Yeah. Well, like, I think that's it. Like, I think here's the thing, like, I find, because even with, like, trying to make it as a writer and stuff, like, the art it's just so unrewarding, I think, until you just keep getting better and better. But it all boils down to funding. Like, and I
Hmm.
like so much of it, I think, like, if someone comes along and gives you 500,000 there for marketing or something, like, that's, I think a lot of people could make it, but it's trying to get there. That's the thing. That's why it's
Oh
so
yeah.
hard to get ahead when you're like, when you don't come from affluence or like with a big backer early on. It's really difficult. But I think what you learn on the way, like you were talking about that movie where it's about a lot about your man failing. But I think like for writers and film writers and all, the rejection is a constant thing. You have to get
Yeah.
really intimate with rejection. And you kind of have to grow that thick skin because you can't let it get you down because it
Yeah.
just has to be fuel. But I think in that process it's a crucible. That's where I think the mantle of who you are, your character and stuff gets forged. And well, that's the way I think I like to look at it. Maybe maybe that's the way I like to try and. To kind of perceive it that, just to kind of keep going. And I think as well, Joe, with like so in psychology, you have the two big motivators in life, and one's extrinsic and the other's intrinsic. And the extrinsic motivator is like, I'm going to go to that IT job, and it's going to pay my mortgage. That's an extrinsic motivator. You're doing
Yeah.
something for a monetary reward typically. The
Yeah.
intrinsic motivation is like the filmmaking with you, where I'm going to go, I'm going to take this gigantic risk, and there may be nothing at the end of it, but it's almost rewarding a passion inside of me. It's not going to pay the mortgage, but it rewards. But I think you keep doing that and you keep learning, like you keep putting out them shorts, them films, getting cleaning up your awards and stuff like that as well, and you will again. And by the time you get to the feature film, then you've racked up all the experience and the knowledge and the
Hmm.
know-how, and I think
Yeah.
that's the story I want to believe in.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's that pursuit of I can't live with myself if I didn't attempt it. You know,
Yeah,
if I didn't try to make it in the thing I care about, because I can't just sit at a desk every day. I mean, I sit at my desk a lot to edit, but I find myself going to do all my paperwork at coffee shops and stuff because
yeah,
I can't just sit down at it. Like I'm too ADHD for that.
yeah,
I'm too hyper to sit at my desk so long. I've got to
yeah,
get out and do things and work on my own schedule and be flexible and and I get to create every single day. That's so cool. It's so cool, even on a smaller scale. It's a lot of fun to be
yeah.
able to do that. So I think that person, so and she knows exactly who she is, and I thank her every time I've ever talked to her. I'm like, I thank you for making me do that and getting into what and I think my wife for putting up with the fact that I make films while she works the 9 to 5.
But that's it, like the weddings and stuff like that's because they are like, but that's probably a tough editing process after. Like, so there's going to be so much footage. It's probably just boiling it
Hmm.
all down and chopping it and turning it. But again, it's all skill based as well. You getting
Yeah.
your angles there, finding the stories in the shots is going to have
Hmm.
you know a, a dividend when you're doing on the short films, I'd say.
Oh yeah, it's I would say like I use the same skill sets for both things. It's just you're telling with a wedding you're telling a true story. You're telling
Yeah,
their story of their love and their relationship and in the story of their day as to where with in a way like I joke that that's all scripted too in some ways because we know how their day is going to unfold. We know what it's going to happen when. It's just we're capturing in the moment what they're doing and saying.
yeah,
Um, we know what order it's going to happen in, so it's there's already a story structure there. And then sometimes I can tell a nonlinear wedding story where we start with beautiful vows, and then we start building up to that moment of the first kiss,
Yeah.
So there's even tension in weddings.
Yeah, if you can,
And,
yeah, you just have to find it.
yes, absolutely. You just
Scanning
have
the
to find where the
audience,
story
who's going
is.
to raise their hand?
Yeah. You know what's funny? In 10 years of doing it, I've never had somebody object at a wedding. So you see
Thankfully.
it in movies, but I've never seen it in person.
Yeah.
200 weddings, I've never had that happen.
Yeah, it's wild. Like, imagine it. Imagine how awkward it would be. Like, I'd turn into
Oh yeah.
myself. I think just even vicarious embarrassment of it.
Oh yeah. There's even moments that are not like that at weddings that I turn in embarrassment.
Yeah. Come here, because I just want to ask you a question just on the American weddings, because
Sure.
I have friends out there, or they're back home. They were living in New York, but they had their wedding out there, and I think the wedding stopped at 10 p.m. Would that be common that it go till, or is it an early into the morning kind of job?
Yeah, it can vary. So like the wedding I shot this past Saturday, weddings pay the bills, I'll tell you. That one, I worked from 8 a.m. to like 4 p.m. Like they had a morning wedding. They had their wedding at 11:30 in the morning, and they had brunch instead of dinner. And
Wow.
it was kind of like a garden party kind of thing in this beautiful atrium. It was cute. It was fun, and that was very them. It worked, and they actually ended up after the wedding, like everything was over. She went out and got in a special dress, and they went out to dinner
So far,
together
my
and spent the
God.
evening. Yeah, so like, but then I've also shot weddings where I'm there till midnight and 1 in the morning. It's just it varies.
Yeah.
I try to like set a time limit in my contract so that I'm not working like 14, 15 hours. I try to like be like, okay, you should like realistically be able to get like these main events done before then I don't have to stay there till the end of the party. So you see some because I always say like by the first hour into the first hour on the open dance floor, it's the same 10 people dancing and they're drunker than they were an hour earlier, and it just gets worse. The
Yeah.
dancing just looks worse, and everybody's sweaty and gross, and it's like nobody's going to want footage of that anymore.
Yeah.
So I always try to be done by the first half an hour of dancing is my goal.
Oh, definitely. It starts to get sloppier and messier then. And yeah, I think no one wants a
Oh
camera
yeah.
around.
Yeah. And I always try to arrive when the bride's already in her makeup because no bride wants footage of herself out of makeup.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd delete that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. You don't include that in the video because you'll have a ticked off bride. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
And so, Joe, like in film school, then, what do you actually like? What's the curriculum in there? Like, do you do like different so how to do a music video, how to do like commercial work, how to do a movie? Is it split like that, or you kind of taught the basics and then you kind of permeate out into whichever field you want?
So it depends on the school. I did a 2 year program at a community college or state community college, and so I went to Cincinnati State Technical and Community College, and it was a 2 year program in audio and video production.
Okay.
So my focus was less on the theory side of things, and
Hmm.
mine was more on the technical side. So it was learning how to sound mix, learning how to do lighting, cameras, work on in a studio, stuff like that. There was a couple theory based papers in some of those classes. Like one of my professors made us do a write up on or I don't want to call it. It wasn't a dissertation, but it was like a compare and contrast on a director. Like we were randomly assigned to a famous director, and we had to like watch 3 or 4 of their films, and then like start coming up with like, where are the themes of their filmmaking? What kind of things do they explore? Where is their voice? So there's stuff like that, but it wasn't heavily into the theory side. It was very on the technical side.
Hmm.
So I know a lot of directors who really don't know how to do technical stuff. Um, but me knowing how to do the technical stuff has found me a lot of paid work in
Yeah.
Ohio, where you have to be a jack of all trades. You jack of all trades, master of none. And so I specialize in direction, but like I know how to do all these other things. Like I always joke, I know enough about audio to know when I need to hire a better audio person. Um, so like I do, I can do a certain amount of audio, but like, when it even comes to mixing my own films, I call in a sound mixer because I'm not a good enough mixer for,
Yeah.
you know, that level, but I can do basic mixing for weddings and commercials and things. I can do some really basic mixing. So it was more of a technical school. I know people that went to like 4-year film schools and they don't know nearly as much on the technical side of things. They know all the theory, but they don't know how to utilize anything, and so they have to go get on set. So the cool part with that program is that we got hands-on with equipment by the second semester. Like we had our hands on cameras and lights, and we're learning set etiquette and terminology really fast. And I went in thinking I knew all this stuff from the stuff I'd done in high school, and I found out I didn't know crap. I didn't know anything. I always joke, like, as a filmmaker, you can learn a lot on YouTube. You don't need to go into debt for it, because the American school system, college is very expensive.
Man, we hear stories over here.
Oh
It's
yeah,
frightening.
it's a lot. I mean, I just paid off the last of my student loans.
How many years out?
I've been graduated for 10 years. So I paid him at 9 years. I finished them off last year. And yeah. And granted, there were COVID years in there. We stalled on payments for a little while and the U.S. government halted payments and interest during that time frame, because nobody had money coming in, especially freelancers like me. Like, COVID killed us. And we just finished my wife's student loans. So we're finally like, oh, look, we can save that money now.
I'd say. But like, why do you think? Because like in Ireland, I think, like, the fees are maybe, it's like 2,500 a year, maybe 5,000 a year. It's very little anyway. I know Scotland's like free and stuff, I think, still. But like, what, like, man, honestly, like, education is the backbone of any economy, any population. Like, it has like so many benefits on, like, longevity, GDP, everything. Why do you think there's such, like, both parties over there? Why they can't, like, why won't it be even a non-partisan issue, just to, we want to have the most educated society possible, and the only way to do that is to not cripple people in debt, like.
Oh yeah, I agree, but I think it comes from a handful of things. There's a lot of problems. I mean, we could do an entire episode on the college system in the U.S. I think it's a combination of things. I think I have a very libertarian point of view on this, where I'm just like, I don't think the government should have gotten involved in it. The schools were cheaper before the government started subsidizing it. Ooh, wow. So the schools started raising the money because they saw opportunity for more money, because the government's subsidizing and the government's handing out loans. And then we have kids that are taking out loans that don't understand how a loan works, or what an interest rate is. Like, they're not educated on what that actually means and how much they're going to pay out of pocket. So you have an 18-year-old kid signing over a loan for 4 to 5% interest rate, and they don't understand what that means. There's not enough education to what goes into that. There's scholarships and stuff, and there's Pell Grants, but then there's actual loans that have to be paid back. And when you're illiterate to that, when you're financially illiterate to that, you take out loans that you don't understand, then later on you end up with all this massive amount of debt. But then there's this encouragement that everybody like, for all my growing up, all I heard was, you have to go to college to get a good job. But then the market got oversaturated with everybody getting the same bachelor's degrees. And what we had less of was skilled workers.
Yeah.
So we don't have a lot of, so now guess who's making a lot of money? Electricians, plumbers, skilled laborers, who you could go to a technical school, like what Cincinnati State does. Shout out to Cincinnati State. I'm giving all this promo. But they do technical schools at a much cheaper rate than a university. So, like, I left school with like $15K in debt, maybe. So it's not horrible for a 2-year program, but it's not great. But it's better than nothing. But I had a handful of scholarships. My degree would have been about $20,000 probably in the end, if I hadn't gotten a couple scholarships and some grants. I had a couple professors recommend me for some scholarships that were coming from different groups from the school. So I had but also I got some refund money from some of my grants, and I was able to use that to buy some of my first pieces of equipment for my own company. Nice. So because that was a low interest rate for me to be able to start my business. So it's kind of cool. I was able to use it because I was going to film school. I could use that money for film equipment that I could then later use after I graduated. So that was kind of neat. I was able to buy a computer and stuff like that, some stuff that I needed to kind of get started. So like there are positives and negatives to the American education system.
Yeah.
But it's going to school for an art degree that when you're spending $40,000-$50,000 for a bachelor's in art, like, well, what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
That's where I tell some young filmmakers that they'll ask me, should I go to film school? I'm like, do you have a scholarship? Do you have a full ride? If you don't, then no. Because it's so hard to make it in this field, and it's also one of those fields where you don't need a degree. A degree can help, but you don't need one. Like if you want to go be a cinematographer, just go get on set and start working with the camera department.
Yeah.
Volunteer. Go learn. Like go do a free internship with somebody and start learning the trade,
Yeah.
because film is a trade. That's what I always consider. It's not a thing you have to go get educated for. So I would say, like, I took on a lot. I took on TET to go learn stuff I could have learned on
Yeah.
YouTube. Um, that and I, no brand. I've worked with Pepsi. I've worked with Victoria's Secret. I've worked with the Cincinnati Bengals. I've worked with the Cincinnati Reds. So these are all big brands. I've worked with Fifth Third. No one's ever asked to see my degree.
Yeah.
They've seen my portfolio.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's it, Joe. Like, you can go do a bachelor's in literature, but if you want to become a writer, just start writing. Read lots of
Yes.
books and start writing. It's like I get, yeah, if you want to become a doctor, if it's something specialized. Like my degree was in psychology. I didn't go become a psychologist. I kind of went into advertising, but because it was an extra 2 years, and it was maybe even 3 years just to get. But I didn't bother anyway. But yeah, it's like, unless you want to specialize, like the craziest thing I heard there recently is the average debt of undertaken by like a graduate of that becomes a doctor in America is like $500,000. The
Oh yeah,
average.
medical school's insane. Yeah.
Like, doctors play a hugely pivotal role in society. Like, they're so important, and like, to put them in such debt, like, it's crazy. It should be making it cheaper. Well, no, I don't know. It just seems wild, man. But yeah, I think YouTube has changed the game though, with so much of this stuff that isn't like a specialized. Like, look, you can't learn dentistry on YouTube,
Right.
but you can learn like a lot of other stuff
Yeah.
that like still,
Yeah.
still really important. But we have the same issue in Ireland where after in 2009, when we had the economic collapse, like the big recession, uh, like the whole bottom fell out of the construction industry in Ireland. Like, I mean, it just decimated it, and everyone was kind of pushed into college. And now we're in a situation where we can't build enough homes because there's not enough like tradespeople in the country. Like, it's just,
Yeah.
and we can't bring them in really as much from other countries either, because there's nowhere in the stay. There's nowhere to rent or buy. It's like, it's a weird quagmire we're in. But I think them roles
Yeah.
and AI can't take them roles either. Let's be honest.
Oh, I
And AI
know.
isn't going to plumb a house. I don't think.
Oh, I was just saying this because I'm sure you've heard world news and stuff that's going on, and like all the deportations that are happening here and stuff.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I have so many conservative, family members or friends that are, they're all worried about, people from Mexico taking jobs. And I'm like, you're worried about the wrong jobs.
Yeah.
Like you don't understand that AI has to be regulated in some way because they're coming for your jobs.
Yeah.
Like the illegal immigrants or the immigrants in general, like they are not coming for your job. Like they're coming for the jobs that nobody wants.
Yeah.
It's like, and guess what? You don't want those jobs. You need to be more worried about AI taking your job because that's what's coming. Like, all these office jobs are going to become so obsolete so fast because one person can do 20 person's job using AI.
And not
Like,
complain.
oh yeah, and it's gonna be a wake up call for people. And I hate AI. I hate it in the arts. I'm
Hate it
not
as
big
well.
on it. I think I'm not a fan. I think it's also turning not talented people into pretending they can be artists.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start getting more AI based movies. I think we're going to get AI based TV shows, and it's going to take all of the humanity out of art.
Yeah.
And that is
And
what I'm
it's not
terrified
art
of.
though, then. I think
Yeah,
like,
it's not.
it's
It's
just
not.
entertainment.
But they think it is. It's
Yeah.
the illusion of art.
Yeah.
They think that because they put a prompt in that now they're an artist.
Yeah.
And
They're
like
not.
that's what's gonna they can create their own movies. It's like no, that's not coming from you. You
No.
are literally just taking pieces of data from all these other talented people, and it's creating this Frankenstein's monster of stolen talent is what
Yeah.
it's doing. And I was like, because AI is not actually artificial. It's not thinking itself yet.
No, it's stealing. It's
It's
just stealing.
stealing
And like
knowledge from other
Frankenstein
people.
is the best word for it.
Yeah, it's unholy. I hate it, and
Yeah.
I wish they would regulate it. I hate that all these governments are investing in it. You know, I think it's going to be downright dangerous to the point of, I mean, we're already seeing videos and stuff that people can't tell if it's
Yeah.
AI or not. Video proof is not going to hold up in court anymore.
No.
I mean, we are going to, like, witnesses on the stand are going to be everything. I mean, like it's going to be a nightmare. If you're not worried about AI, you should. That's the dark find for this podcast. Is
Yeah,
AI is
that's the dark
terrifying.
fine.
That's
That
the dark
is.
find. Is AI is coming for our jobs.
But
The relief I have right now is that AI can't shoot a wedding yet. It can edit a wedding, but it can't shoot one.
yeah, and that is the truth. Like that's it, because it's going to come down to that. Me and my wife were in London, not last weekend, the weekend before, and we were riding their tube. It's like their subway, but one of the like it's full of advertisements everywhere, like on the kind of side panels and stuff. But one of it was the most tone deaf, I thought, like disgusting advertisement I've ever seen. Not like it wasn't gory or anything. It was just like a slogan. It was pretty much like replace 2,400 BDRs. It's like, you know, salespeople pretty much with our AI tool. So it's literally just advocating to strip out 240 salespeople out of an organization and implant it with this, like, you know, artificial sales rep. And I just thought, like, it was such a tone deaf. Like, a lot of the people that be using that subway be going to work to an office job, and it's kind of just a slap in the face that, like, here, you know, it's almost like sharpening the guillotine as it comes down on you. It's like these people are going
Yeah.
in, like, probably working in marketing to help these companies, and then it's just, it's all going to go poof.
People are going to have to get good at trade jobs really fast.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to be a wake up call, and people think it's 10, 15 years. No, it's sooner than that.
Yeah.
Because what I've been saying is, if you think that where they're at with AI right now, that we can see is a lot, what do you think they're not showing us?
Oh, man.
The government has access to way more than we have access to. So you think that what we see as like that's being marketed to us as consumers is a lot? What does the government have access to?
Yeah.
And like that's any government in the world. You know, when you start going into, do I trust that government? Like it's the new nuclear age, in my opinion. Like
Yeah.
what can be done with AI? You're not going to need bombs because you're going to be able to tear. People are going to be tearing down countries from the inside using AI for misinformation.
Yeah.
I mean, we've been seeing governments using misinformation for a long time to tear down societies, and now with AI, it's going to be a lot easier. And that is a terrifying thought. Yeah, this got real so fast.
Yeah, oh, definitely. My new thriller. It's I pre-launched there on Kickstarter, but it's a dystopian novel. But it's set in like, so there's this authority, and the authority pretty much everyone's hooked on an app. Like it's like kind of like, you know, they're sucked into the app, but the app comes like where it's chapter one or the prologue kicks off with the app has come with now artificial intelligence so powerful it can predict you know, the user's behavior, like any sort of, you know, indiscretion is like deemed punishable and stuff. So it's almost like a sonar that can like read your thoughts. But and like I think that's nearly like I'm probably a bit on the nose with the theme of the book, but I genuinely think it could be trending that way, where it's like, because if you think of it, people live on their phone now. I think it's, you know, what did I read? So people scroll it's 300 foot a day, so the height of the Statue of Liberty, scroll. So that's how much, like, you know, they're scrolling. I think the average is up to around 5.5 hours now people are spending on devices. So if you're like on a device that long, and it can learn that much about you, how far is it along then where it starts to predict everything you're going to do? It starts to understand your routine, your behaviors, what you're writing, your comments, what way you interact. And that's the terrifying thing, where it starts to be able to subtly manipulate you then based on all this data it's collected on you. But
Yeah.
let's hope.
Oh, this is why I said social media is a necessary evil right now, because everybody's on it, and that's where the market is when you're
Yeah.
marketing yourself and your projects. But people think that they're a customer of Facebook or Instagram because they have customer service departments. You're not the customer, you're the product.
Yeah.
You're the product, your information. You are producing information for them to sell to other people. That is your job. That is why it's free. Because
Yeah.
nothing's free. But that's why it's free.
Yeah.
Your information. And people kept saying, "Oh, well, that's okay. I'm okay with my information going there." And I'm like, I mean, I have to be, because that's where I've got to be to market myself. But yeah,
Yeah.
I don't love that my information is going to all these companies and stuff. And I'm glad that there are, some of these tech companies are getting called out for it. Like, what was it? 23andMe, the DNA test
Yeah.
company or whatever. They've been selling DNA information. What? What an invasion of privacy, that you're acting like it's this medical thing and then selling it. Like, now they're getting absolutely lambasted
Are
by the
they?
U.S.
I
government,
haven't
which is
followed
good.
it
Oh
too
yeah,
close.
oh yeah. There's lawsuits like crazy. The government's coming after them, because that is so dishonest.
Oh.
Oh yeah, and I did one of those ancestry ones a while back, and people were like, "Well, aren't you worried what they're going to do with your DNA?" And I'm like, yeah, a little bit, but like at the same time, I was like, I wanted to find out more about my ancestors and stuff like that. So I was like, I was willing to trade my information essentially for that. But I knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
Some people don't know what they're even submitting to, and that's the scary part, is that they don't know what they're submitting to.
I
And
know.
so I went in knowing what the consequences could be. So
Yeah.
yeah, at least I was willing to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. I did one of them. I think it was My Heritage, the one I did. Now, I'm very boring ethnicity. I think it was just made up of Scottish, Irish, Welsh, English, really. It was just that whole cluster. I'm not an exotic or fun. I thought there might have been a bit of
Yeah.
Viking. No, nothing.
Yeah, mine was all like Irish, Scottish, Welsh as well, and Dutch. I'm Dutch
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Right.
So like there was
Um,
a lot of mixture in there, which is funny because it lined up pretty closely with what we kind of knew about my family history, and how we ended up, stateside in the early 1800s and stuff. So some of my ancestors even like dated back pre-revolution, so which was
wow.
kind of cool. Yeah. And what people don't realize too is that like my sister's results were a little different, and like people are like, well, wouldn't you guys have the same results? It's like, no, because it's how much DNA from those things passed on to you. So like I
Yeah.
have Native American like relatives, but like none of the Native American DNA came down. Like I have
Yeah.
none of it. Like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like no, not even present anymore to me, but it's present in some of my other family members. Um, so it's like, because like it was like my great 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 grandmother was like half Cherokee.
Okay.
So it's way back there, and and like you always hear the legends of how that happened and stuff, but it's like, my mom was like, well, shouldn't it, be similar? And I'm like, it is similar. It's what percentage you essentially got, and that's what other people don't quite realize, that that's what it's doing, is figuring out how much passed on to you. And I'm apparently very very Scottish and very Irish and very
Yeah.
Dutch.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like all the white things you can be, like, aside from German.
That's it. And come here, tell me, like, it's anything I watch on the Appalachians, man, it seems like a place that is just, it's so ideal for horror. Like, it just, any of the, like, it seems like a really, like, oh yeah, you live close by there, you said. Like,
Yeah,
what's it like? What's
yeah.
it actually like there? Does it have that kind of scary feeling in the mountains?
Yeah, so I live up, just north of Cincinnati, and if you drive down into Kentucky, like you'll start getting into the Appalachians and stuff. So my grandfather grew up in Wolfe County, Kentucky, which is way down in the hollers, as we call them. And like he would always, talk about how it could be very eerie in there. There's a lot of Appalachian legends of like,
Yeah.
the haint, and you're not even supposed to say it. If you're Appalachian, they're very superstitious. If you say it, like it's to invite it in.
And what is
Have
it?
you the haint? It's just a haunt. It's just how they pronounce
Oh,
it.
it's
It's a
not.
haunt.
It's not
It's
a
a scare.
cryptid
It's
thing.
a so it's like a good like, and I might be telling it wrong. I'm paraphrasing, but it's like supposedly if you say the word haint, the haint will come to your house that night. And if it comes to your house, um, it will count things on its way in and to come and kill you, essentially. But so like people would. Have you ever seen like in Appalachian imagery, like the broom with all the straw, on it, like it had like or not straw, like wiry, like very wiry brooms with a lot of
Okay.
spots. They would hang it over door frames, and that's like part of the legend is that like supposedly you like it would come through, but it has to count all of that before it's allowed to pass.
Oh,
So they would hang it over their door frame, and if it can't finish counting it by morning, it can't come in. So there's ones like that. There's the like blue skinned people in the mountains because they are so inbred that their skin
I've
is
heard of
blue.
this one. I've
There's
seen a movie
there's
like this. What was the
yeah.
movie? Oh, it was a brilliant movie. I can't remember, but that kind of reminds me of it. It was that kind
Mhm.
of inbreedy Hills of Eyes feeling.
Yeah. Yeah, there's supposedly still wild men in the mountains. There's people that they live off the grid completely. They live in the woods. They don't, you don't come in their community. They don't bother
Yeah.
you. There's still supposedly stuff like that. There's the Wendigo. I'm sure you've heard of the Wendigo. That dates back to Native Americans even. The Wendigo supposedly can like become other things.
Yeah.
I don't fully understand that legend. But uh, we always say if you hear something you didn't. That's if you hear something you didn't.
Yeah.
And you don't whistle alone. You don't sing songs in the hollers in the Appalachian forests.
And the hollers are
Um,
like, are they like, is it the kind of like valley parts of it?
it's like a hollow. Yeah,
Yeah.
like they just call it a holler because it's the Appalachian accent.
Yeah.
It's like my grandfather grew up in a holler. So he didn't have a lot of most of his like scary stories had to do with like mountain lions.
Yeah.
Like he was followed home by a mountain lion one night, and like or some kids just being
Yeah.
jerks to him and stuff. Like there's a lot of deeply religious people in Appalachia and stuff, and they were very involved in like church culture and stuff. So they didn't like to talk about the legends because you just don't talk about those things,
Yeah.
because those are
Superstition.
demonic and yeah. So it depends. And Appalachia stretches, from all the way from like Virginia down like into Kentucky and then down into Tennessee and Georgia. So like there's stretches like the Appalachian Trail. Like if you walked it, it's you would end up all the way down in Georgia.
Oh.
So it's a long stretch. So there's a lot of deep ancient forest. And was it, they say that, like Pangea, the continent as a whole, right? Like before it split apart,
Yeah.
like if you line it up, the Appalachian mountain lines, actually line up with like the Scottish Highlands. So
Oh.
like if you piece it together, it's actually part of the same ancient like mountain lines and like structures. So
Oh.
which is really interesting because so many Scots came to America and ended up in Appalachia specifically. Like that's where they settled, and that's weird. Like
That is
there's
weird.
no way they would have known that. It's like they were drawn to it. It's really neat. I love it. Like the superstition of it all is very very
Ah.
fun and very interesting. I love Appalachia. I don't want to live there. Like
Yeah.
I like my nice cushy life in the
Yeah.
suburbs.
It's like off the
But I do.
grid kind of stuff,
Oh yeah,
you know?
it's very neat to go visit it, and it's very neat to hike it. And I'll say like going down there, it's like there's something in your bones that just you're just like, man, this is cool. Like,
Primal.
and but my grandfather ran away from it to, come work at a steel mill up north, because there's not a lot of jobs. He grew up on a tobacco farm.
Yeah.
And so they would grow tobacco. And when he was about 17, he lied about his age to get a job at the local steel mill up here. which was, where he lived down there, he would have to take trains and buses or, stuff up here. Um, and it's like now with highways, it's still like a 3.5 hour drive, I think, down to like
Oh,
Wolf County.
yeah.
Um, and like the county seat of Wolf County is Campton, and the population's like a couple thousand people. Like it's a very small area, and it's really weird too, because like both sides of my family came from that same county.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like but they didn't know each other. They knew of each other, but they didn't know each other.
Yeah, it's
Like, 'cause
just
my
random.
dad's family owned a general store. Like his aunt and uncle owned a general store down in Campton, and so everybody down there knew that store, and so they knew who owned it, but they didn't know him personally,
Yeah.
well, and stuff. That's where my mom's side, where they were farmers, working on tobacco farms. So like, yeah, it's kind of weird. It's like Appalachia. Like at some point, I want to make a movie,
Oh,
that involves like 1940s, 1950s Appalachia, and like kind of how I just tell some of my grandfather's stories. And he passed away 5 years ago, and but like I retell some of those legends and
oh, they're
fun things to my
brilliant.
kids. Oh, like even one of them is just like I'll go up to my kids. I'll be like, they'll be, "Oh, Dad, look, a bird!" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, well, you know how to catch a bird, right?" And they'll be like, "Well, no." I was like, "Well, you got to go put salt on its tail." And they'd be like, "What?" Like, "Got to put salt on its tail." Because my grandfather told me this when I was a kid. You got to go put salt on its tail. I chased that bird around the yard. Every time I saw a bird, I'd run after him with salt, thinking like that's. And he said, "Well, what happens if you put salt on its tail? It turns around to lick it off, and you grab it." And I was just, he had heard that as a kid, and he just passed it on to us, and it
Passed
was,
it on. There's
so.
some brilliant
And as a
stories.
kid, I thought that was real, and so I told
Yeah.
my kids, and like they're like, "Yeah, you got to put salt." They tell other people confidently, "You got to put salt on its tail." Like
Yeah.
they're
I
passing on
just
some of that
them some
stuff.
of them old kind of eerie stories, like that kind of X Files vibe. Like that's X
Yeah,
Files was like one of my favorite shows, and any like I'm like that. I just want to believe that there's something weird going on, but then I don't want to be around it either. If it is
yeah,
there.
yeah. Like there are some parts of the Appalachian, mountains that I think are spooky. The places I've been to aren't terrible. Like just, West Virginia scares me more than Kentucky. Like, have you ever been to like Point Pleasant? Have you been to the U.S.? I'm guessing I
Yeah,
have.
I'm very like uh, only Vegas. Three
Only
times to
Vegas.
Vegas. I actually need to go. Like, I haven't been to New York. I lived in Canada for in Toronto for
Okay.
years, and yeah, I never made it down. Like, I was supposed to go to a concert in Detroit, and yeah, we didn't after. But no, like, yeah, I need to do more of the US. Like, I'd love to go to Texas. I'd love to do
Oh
Florida.
yeah.
Uh,
Texas is
well,
fun. Florida's fun. It's
yeah,
so diverse. Like that's the thing is like I said, I'm not far from Appalachia, but it's like I've been to Florida, I've been to Texas, I've been to New York. It's like all very different from each other. Even landscape wise, it's so different. Like you
yeah,
see completely different things. But speaking of like West Virginia, like I'm sure you've heard of the Mothman of Point Pleasant. I mean,
yeah.
that's a very famous one. So like my brother and I went down and explored Point Pleasant. We went to the TNT sites and stuff that supposedly where Mothman originated, and it's become very touristy down there. But like, it's a little creepy little town. It's a little
Yeah,
weird. It's a little off, and I think they've tried to stimulate their economy by really just leaning into the Mothman thing.
yeah,
But it's neat. I'm going back again soon just for fun. Like my mom wants to go. Like my mom thought it would be interesting to go. So there's some neat stuff. If you're ever in Ohio, I'll show you some stuff.
definitely.
There's some neat places. We have a haunted mansion and a haunted opera house right in my hometown of Middletown, that
Wow.
were built in the 1800s, and they're neat. It's basically like a Gothic castle in downtown. It's
Oh,
weird. Yeah, it's got gargoyles on it. For some, like there's so many stories about it.
yeah.
So
Anything castle
yeah,
just
I
tends
love
to
like
have a haunt. Mm,
Americana legends and stuff are so fun. Just the stuff that gets passed down is neat, and I like that's why I like setting my stories in the Midwest, because Hollywood doesn't understand the Midwest. LA
yeah,
is so different. LA, like California, like I have friends from California that are like this, like Ohio is nothing like LA, like and San Diego and all that. Like California culture is so different than Midwestern culture. You don't understand the Midwest unless you lived in it.
I'd
But
say.
everybody here's so friendly. That's the thing. Everybody here in the Midwest is so friendly.
Yeah.
Especially Ohio. The further south you go, the friendlier people get. It's really funny.
Oh, is that kind
It's
of the
like
way yeah, it would. Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. Like you go to Texas, Alabama. You're gonna have all this hospitality, people being extra nice, even when they don't want to be, they'll be nice.
Yeah.
Like because that's just how they are. Like
Yeah.
they have to be hospitable. Northern Ohio less friendly. Southern Ohio starts to get kind of friendly. That's where I'm at. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah,
And
sorry, that
Ohio's
was a
big, is it a big state?
rant. Ohio's a lot bigger than people think it is.
Yeah.
They a lot of people call us a flyover state, but we have three of the biggest cities. Like we have three huge cities. We have Columbus, which is about 2 million people in their greater Columbus area. Cincinnati is about 350,000. Cleveland, I think, is 400 or 500. I know it's like we
Yeah.
have three really big cities. All like Columbus is smack dab in the middle. Cleveland at the very top. Cincinnati's right on the Ohio-Kentucky border, and so like we have three massive cities, and then we have a lot of smaller cities that are like 50 to 100,000. We're a big state, like as far as like population density, and then we have a ton of land too. Up north in northern, like northeastern Ohio, it's a lot of plains and like corn, and
Yeah.
as we're in northwestern Ohio is like more wildernessy. Southeast Ohio, it's Appalachian. It's very mountain ranges, hills, trees, and Southwest Ohio is a lot of settlement along the river. So
Yeah.
like it's just we have a lot of everything here. I always say like you're an hour drive from a great time in a city, or a really really nice hike.
Yeah. Which is
Like
lovely. You have to
and
best
like
of
feeling like
both.
you're off the grid. Or a farm, there's a little bit of everything. It just, there's a lot of diversity in Ohio, and people, it's become, the trend on TikTok that everything, the kids say Ohio as lame, like it's now become a synonym for lame, or But if you've been here, like it's cool. People always say there's nothing to do in Ohio, and I'm like, then you're not looking hard enough.
Yeah. And
it's,
sometimes it's
there's a
nice to
lot.
have the bit of peace out, like, because you're
Mhm.
so lambasted with, messages, do this, do that, and all, just to break out, kind of get the peace. Like, I think the older you get, the more you seek that rather than. So if the kids are saying it's uncool, I probably want to start going there.
Yeah, yeah. I think kids here don't even fully appreciate it until they get older and they start
Yeah.
realizing how much stuff they have. Like you go, there are places. I've been places where there really is nothing to do. But I mean, like I said, I live 40 minutes from downtown Cincinnati. I live 30 minutes from downtown Dayton, Ohio, which is like uh, another city with other things to do.
Yeah.
I'm an hour and a half from Columbus.
Yeah.
And I know, in Europe, like I always joke, like I said, Europeans are always like, well, that seems like a long drive. It's like, you're just used to it here. Like you drive everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no public transportation would be a nightmare here because it's so expansive. I
Yeah.
mean,
That's the thing.
you can, in I was like in London, you can take a couple hour train ride and end up in, France or Germany.
Yeah, they
Like,
do. They have that tunnel, the Euro tunnel, I think yeah, it is.
yeah. And
Yeah,
I'm like, here, I can drive from Cincinnati all the way up to Cleveland, and it takes 4 hours, 4 or 5 hours, and I'm still in the state of Ohio, you know,
yeah, I think that's the
you know,
difference. The size
yeah,
difference, the geographical scale difference. Like you'll drive from one end of Ireland to the other in probably 4 hours, like tip to
mhm,
tip. So like that
yeah,
just shows. I think Ireland would fit into Texas 8 times.
yeah. It's Texas is unreal.
Yeah,
Texas is so massive. People do not realize how big it really is. My favorite is here. Like like I said, I like following like TikTokers and YouTubers who travel here and like they're learning it for the first time. I love sharing American culture because people act like we don't have culture, but we've got all these subcultures that have developed
that's
from the
it.
melting pot that we are.
Yeah,
That we have Irish Americans and and Italian Americans and like the subcultures that came out of the immigrants that came here are completely different than what they are back, in our homelands,
yeah.
right? So like I love sharing it. And when people come here, they're like, "Oh yeah, well I'm gonna go to New York City, and then I'm gonna make our way down to Florida, and then we're gonna go to California." And I'm like, "How long are you here?" And they're like, "A week." And I'm like, "Good luck." Like,
Maybe a fast
I was like,
car.
"You're gonna be in your car the entire time."
Yeah,
Like, unless
definitely.
you're, if you're just flying in and out quick, I guess. Like, but you're not really gonna see a whole lot in that case. because California is a several day drive if you're driving,
Oh,
and I mean, it takes several days to cross the country,
Jesus.
with if you're stopping for rest here and there. Um, so it's a hike, you have to if you're going to California, you better be flying unless you're
Yeah.
taking a road trip. So when my kids get older, I really want to do the whole American road trip thing, go out and drive through, hit the Grand Canyon, make our way to California, up to Washington and back. Like that whole West Coast kind of road trip would be a lot of fun. Hit Vegas,
Yeah.
stuff like that.
Well,
Just to say I've done it.
when we were flying back from Vegas, it was last July, but we flew back home through Seattle and Tacoma. We flew into, and oh my god, the forests around there. I was like to my wife,
Oh yeah,
I would do anything to just like it just was like these pine forests everywhere, and I was
yep.
like, this looks like kind of sort of paradise. It was so unbelievable looking. I'd never seen anything like it because it's just miles upon it's all your eyes can see as you're coming down into that airport. It's just pine forests, and it's like, whoa, that feels. I'd never seen anything like it. It was incredible.
That's supposedly where Bigfoot is, like
Yeah,
in the
yeah. The
Pacific Northwest.
squalors up
That's
there.
those, yeah. Like, well, it's funny. Going back to squalor, like that. I chose the name the squalor to honor my dad's story from Kentucky. So down there, like everywhere's got their own like cryptid legends and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so I grew up hearing him tell stories about the Kentucky squalor, and that it's their version of Bigfoot, and it screams and yells. And
Oh.
so he swears up and down that he heard it one night, and they booked it out of there so fast. And so he
Ooh.
always talks about that story. And so I was like, I'm going to call it the squalor because like Bigfoot's really Pacific Northwest. Like Ohio's got the grass man, but I was like, nobody ever talks about the Kentucky squalor. So I was like, even
Yeah.
though this story's set in Ohio, I was like, I'm going to play with the squalor a little
Go with
bit,
the
just like,
squalor. That's
make it a
it. It's a
local
good one.
legend.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and like I said, it just reminded me of my dad's story, and what they probably heard was a wildcat. Like there's these
Yeah.
mountain lions out there screeching and screaming in the night, or even like maybe a fisher cat. Fisher cats are real particular. I don't even know if they're a rodent or if they're actually a cat, but they scream and you're like, what is that?
Yeah.
it,
Well,
it sounds like a person screaming.
yeah, like we have like a house cat, but like she goes out, but like cause it's we're living in the country now, uh, and because they're like doing a lot of the farm work, like tilling fields and like are doing all the hay and stuff. You have a lot of like shrews. Do you ever hear of a shrew?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have all them like so like twice a day she's coming leaving. We call it gifts. She's coming leaving like these dead shrews at the door, and it's like it's so insane because this like we feed her like she's an indoor cat mostly. She's like she kind of
Yeah.
half and half, but she gets fed 3 times a day.
Yeah.
That like I think evolution must have just rewired or wired like cats' brains to enjoy hunting or enjoy killing because she's
Oh
not
yeah.
eating for food. So that's why
Yeah.
them big cats are probably the most. They're way more terrifying than a squaller, really, because
Oh yeah.
these things are killing machines, and they'll hunt even when they're not hungry. Well, I know what a domestic cat,
Oh
but I can imagine some of them big cats are
yeah.
probably similar. It's in their their DNA to hunt.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I ain't messing around with a mountain lion. I'm,
No way.
yeah. I've been lucky enough to not run into one.
Oh man, yes,
Like I
beautiful
said, my
animal,
grandfather was stalked
absolutely
by one
beautiful.
once, but yeah. And you'll hear them called mountain lions, panthers, or pumas. Like there's a few different words for them, but like North American panther is like it's just a brown giant cat that
Oh
will hunt you. And
yeah,
he said he remembered seeing it. He heard something in the woods behind him. He was walking home. I think he said from church once, because back then, like the local a traveling preacher would come around once a month, and they'd have like big revivals and church services down there. And he said he was walking home late one night from church, and it was a hike. I mean, you're talking about to walk into town several miles. Um, so he'd walk back and he said, I heard something in the woods, and he knew he was being watched, and he kept looking back, and finally he saw the glow of eyes from a mountain lion. He said he called it a panther, and he said, oh man, he said I was just thinking like I'm alone, like And he said, I booked it. And he said, until I caught up with somebody and walked with them.
Oh,
And
damn.
yeah, he said that one terrified him. He didn't like walking home alone after that. 'Cause he said that felt like a close call. And it didn't attack. It just was stalking him.
Just
He
there, the
was keeping an eye on him.
presence.
Well, he was a little boy too. He was probably like 10 or 11 when this happened, And back then you weren't walking with parents. Parents didn't care where you were.
Oh, well, Joe, look, man, thanks so much for coming on. It's been a brilliant conversation. It kind of went in all directions, which I love. It's actually just
I appreciate that.
conversational. And yeah, just really interesting to hear your points of view and stuff. I suppose, Joe, I'll put up your website and all, but if people want to
Sure.
get in touch, watch some of your films, where will I direct them to? Or
Yeah, if you go to averageshowfilms.com,
yeah,
I have a secret link in there. If you click films, you can find the posters and watch some of the films, through the website. Some of our stuff I think is on YouTube. But yeah, if you follow us, you can follow me on JW Cox Official on Instagram. I think I'm the same on TikTok. But yeah, in our Average Joe Films page. And then if you don't care, I'll plug what's next. We're
yeah,
working on
go
our
for
first
it.
we're working on our first feature film.
Oh
Um,
wow, nice.
yeah, so we're launching a fundraising campaign on Indiegogo. We're trying to raise $50,000. That's not a lot for a film, but we do have some cast and crew already ready to go, and we just need to be able to kind of pay some fees to make this thing happen on an indie budget. And so we're launching a crowdfunding campaign, and I'll send you a link to it when I
Is
can
it
for this
launched yet?
episode.
No.
I'm literally finishing the page like today and tomorrow,
Oh, well,
so it should be launched by then.
I'll put the
But
link below as well, and I'll share it
I
on the Dark
appreciate that.
Finds page as well. Give you a shout out there.
Thank you. I
That sounds
appreciate
savage,
it.
man.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a story based around kind of my time in a band and the idea of creatives who are kind of figuring out where they're at in life, and told in 6 parts, in 6 chapters about 6 different, 5 or 6 different people as they're kind of figuring out what's next for them when they realize that they're kind of creatively bankrupt now. They don't have anything new that they can do, and they're trying to figure out where they stand, if they're talented enough to go to the next level, or if they kind of just need to accept where they are. So it's a neat kind of personal story, loosely based on my time in a band, like a lot of love for people that, from that era of my life. And so and a lot of fictional stuff too to make it interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's called End of Another Time is the
Okay.
and it's Another Time is the name of this band that breaks up.
Ah,
So yeah, we're crowdfunding for it. We can use all the help we can get. So between this episode filming and when it releases, I'll have released our announcement video
brilliant, man.
announcing the feature and trying to hype up the local Cincinnati scene for it. Trying to get people excited enough about it to hopefully get some traction and get this thing made properly, because it's been I always said I would make a feature before I turned 30, and I'm 31. And
Yeah,
so I'm a little late, but I'm making it happen. So
that's the thing.
yeah,
Yeah, that's
so
it.
I
You
really
kind of keep
appreciate it.
going. Yeah. So, okay, Joe, perfect. I will put them links in, and yeah, brilliant. Look, best of luck with the project. I'll take a look at it as well. But yeah, excited anyway to see where this goes for you.
Thank you so much, Gary. It was really a pleasure, man. I appreciate you having me on.
Definitely. Look, you come on again, Joe. Maybe after your Oscar there, we'll have you on again. Thanks a
I
million,
just want
man.
people to watch it.
Cheers, man. Thanks a million.